So it's a privilege to me today to get to introduce to you Dr. Ahine Amamoo. She is an associate professor in Samford School of Public Health. She brings over 15 years of public health experience as a biostatistician and epidemiologist. So very smart lady that we have here. Um, Her undergraduate degree is from Spelman College in math, and then she went on to pursue a master's degree in biostatistics and a PhD in epidemiology from Chapel Hill. Her research interests include health disparities, chronic diseases, and utilizing big data to examine health outcomes. She is passionate about giving back to her community and particularly enjoys serving as a missionary. So today she's going to talk to us about her missionary work in Ghana. But I want to add that Ahine is more than just an accomplished, intelligent, driven woman. She is also an amazing role model for people like me. She is compassionate. She's a caring teacher who her students love and adore, and so do her colleagues. And so please join me in welcoming today Ahine.
Well, it's truly a pleasure. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay, great. It's truly a pleasure to be here today. When David asked me to speak, I thought, am I even worthy of being in this place? And then God said, let me remind you that I've tasked you to do many things, and I'm just asking you to be obedient. So I'm being obedient today because this is one of the areas that I don't talk a lot about in public, not because I don't love it, and not because I'm not passionate about it, but because it's just a part of who I am. And so when I talk about it, it sort of makes it feel like it's sort of separate from who I am and how I operate my daily life. So today we're going to talk a little bit about from a candle to a spotlight and me serving in Ghana. So today we're going to sort of discuss who actually can be a missionary. What are some of the common misconceptions about global missions? How we explore some of the missions work that I've had an opportunity to be involved in. And then throughout this presentation, I'm going to sort of talk a little bit about some of the best practices that we've been engaged in and some of the ways that we've tried to avoid some common pitfalls when it comes to global missions. So often people say, I can't be a missionary, right? Or you hear, I'm not called to missions. Or you even say, I'm not an ordained minister, I'm not a pastor, so I cannot do missions. But the reality of it is that missions is a calling for all Christians. Okay? And why is it a calling? It's because we have been charged by Jesus to reach others with his message. And so as Mark 16:15 reminds us, go into all the world and preach the good news to everyone. So when people think about global missions, what do they really think about? Well, I often hear, global missions is this group of foreigners who goes to some community in another country, right? Or they're these ministers who preach the gospel to people on the sides of the road in a dusty desert, right? Or they are these people who are traveling to these distant countries to convert everyone to Christianity. I've also heard that you have to be really old to do missions, and that you have to go to seminary, right? Because you can't be a missionary without having gone to seminary. But I also have always heard that you must go to the jungle or must live in a hut and endure danger to be an effective missionary. But I'm here to tell you that that's not the case. Missions should be an experience where you can freely find ways to share God's love, where there's an opportunity to establish lasting relationships with communities and sustainable changes. And lastly, missions should be fun. It should not be just an experience where the people you are working with are having a good time and learning about Jesus or God, but it also should be an opportunity where you, as a missionary, are enjoying the revels and the beauty of God and his blessings. So for over the past 30 years, I have been blessed to have opportunities to do global missions and outreach in Ghana, West Africa. So to tell you a little bit about myself, I was born and raised here in Birmingham, Alabama. However, my father is from Ghana, West Africa. He met my mother here in Miles College, where they then had us and we've been living our lives. However, I spent my summers in Ghana. And so spending my summers in Ghana really gave me a unique opportunity to really learn both cultures that I've been blessed to have. And so as a result, my parents instilled in us the importance of giving and showing God's love to all people through work. And so each mission that we've had the opportunity to be involved in has been based upon the special needs of the communities that we found ourselves engaged with. More than that, it has been with the intention of introducing these communities to God's faithfulness, His provision, and His love. So when we go on missions, we have a lot of expectations, and some of the expectations we have are to be purposely used by God. No matter what the mission is for, whether it's a medical mission, whether it's a whole family conference mission, whether it's an educational exchange type of mission, we are asked to be purposely used by God so that we can be a witness of His grace to the world, as well as being able to share with our brothers and sisters in Christ. And most importantly, we want to be faithful in sharing God's light. So to tell you a little bit about Ghana, Ghana is found in the western part of Africa. It's here in the square. It is, the capital of Ghana is Accra. It is the first sub-Saharan African nation to gain its independence. And they did that in March 6th of 1957, so not that long ago. One of the things that's very interesting about Ghana is they were colonized by the English. So their native language is English. Although there are hundreds of different languages and dialects, English is the main language. So most individuals who were educated after the after the freedom and things of that nature all know English. Now there are populations of people who may not have as strong strengths in English, but most people do. In terms of religion, I always like to let people know that Christianity is one of the main religions in Ghana. About 71% of the population practice Christianity. There is a large Muslim population as well, with about 17%. But there are populations of people who are what we call indigenous believers. So they believe in their traditional religious beliefs. Something that's very proud of about Ghana is that we are the leading exporter of cocoa to the world. We also are one of the leading exporters of gold, as well as lumber. So in our earlier years of our missions work, we started off with really small intentions, just to be sure that we're helping our family and our friends in our neighborhood. My father, who is a practicing physician, has been for over 40 years, allowed God to continually use his gift while he was there to help meet the health needs of those in his immediate family, as well as the community. We would do things like gather up basic medical supplies, painkillers, multivitamins, things of that nature, and just sort of meet people where they need it. We'd also bring school supplies. We'd collect Bibles. We'd also collect the daily word, or the daily, and pass those out, the daily breads, and pass them out as well. And so during those periods, we would also offer words of encouragement and prayer in such a way that our house that we live in when we're there is that neighborhood house that people feel free to come and sort of visit and learn about God. But we didn't know that the need was going to grow and be so great. But don't we serve a God who is just faithful? He's a God that will always find a way to provide so that we can serve and do more. And that's exactly what he did. He allowed us to use all of our gifts and our talents to provide. The first thing was a medical clinic in the greater Accra region. So what did we do? We mobilized. We partnered with other medical professionals such as physicians, nurses. We had optometrists, we had pharmacists, we had dentists. We gathered all kinds of medical supplies. We brought in medications, we brought in eyeglasses, we brought in dental equipment, and things of that nature. But the other thing that we did that a lot of people don't tend to think about is that we connected with the local community leaders as well as church leaders and volunteers in the greater Accra area. So one of the things that usually happens is people decide to do missions, and they say, I am going to Tanzania. And they plan exactly what they're going to do. They pack everything they need, and they go and they show up, and they say, we're here to help, right? But what if they didn't need that help? What if they really needed something else? So that's why when you're dealing with missions, you want to be sure that you are letting God lead you in the help that you provide. So like I said, these are just some examples of us packing up supplies. When we go, the people who go with us are each allowed one bag of their own. And then the other bag we use for medical mission or for all our missions equipment. But what does that mean? That means when you're getting ready to go back home, what do you get to have? An extra bag. So it used to be, it's a great trade-off. So yeah, you only get to take one bag of your stuff going, but when you come back, boy, you got free reign to buy whatever you need. So, you'll see us, and here's an example of us getting off the plane. And this is actually one of the pictures I took one time coming as we were in the air, coming there. But we mobilized, and we were heading out to do God's work. So our first stop was our medical missions. One of the first big ones we did was around 2007, 2008. This was at the Apostolic Church in Ghana, which is in Nima, actually, which is a small area in Greater Accra. And so there, you'll see here's our medical missions team. We were here, prepared and ready to go. You'll notice that throughout the pictures, you'll notice that in most days, we all have the same thing on. So whether it's scrubs or a uniform shirt or something of that nature. But what was very unique about our medical missions is that we set it up in such a way that people would come and be able to have comprehensive care. So you go and you plan, and everyone is deciding you're going to be able to have your eyes examined, you'll be able to have your teeth examined, you'll also be able to have medical attention given to you. We also planned for you to have any prescriptions that you would need. So not only did we bring prescriptions with us, we went to the pharmacist and bought some of the most common prescriptions. And we'll talk a little bit about why that was important. So we set up, we have a triage area, and the plan was for every person to come in and have their blood checked and their blood pressures checked and all of the regular triage. But to our surprise, when we got there were almost 500 people waiting in line for us. Do you remember what that picture had of all the people that were the volunteers? So we couldn't say no. What did we do? We regrouped. And we set it up in such a way that every person had to choose what was their most pressing health issue. Now, that wasn't what we had really planned on it, right? We had really planned to do this whole health comprehensive. But instead of saying, okay, we can only help 150 of you and send the rest of them home, we felt that it was more important that everyone had some form of care than nothing at all. So as a result, you'll see that there are people waiting in line for the clinics. But people got to see the dentist if they chose, right? And you'll see there's, we did some simple extractions, some simple examinations. These are actually licensed dental professionals. We had medical attention. That's actually my beloved father. So, but yeah, we actually had medical attention provided. We also recognized that not everybody knew English. So we needed to be sure that there were interpreters available who needed to understand. So we actually had local volunteers that came along with us to help interpret for all of those people. They also were able to have eye exams, as thorough as we could have in the environment we were in. And if they were in need of a prescription, we came with this huge vat of donated glasses and things of that nature. We organized them in hopes that we could at least give them something that they would be able to walk away with that would help them. We also had a makeshift pharmacy. And so she is actually a pharmacist and and we had a couple of official farm techs with us, so it wasn't like we were just doing anything. We actually, found individuals who had the gift that God needed for us to use, and then they mobilized and taught the people around them what they needed to know. And so this is actually my cousin, who was a local, he lives there, but he was one of the local volunteers assisting us as well. But we weren't just interested in just the physical aspects of their health. We also wanted to be sure that they were introduced to God if they didn't know him. So every person that came through the line, no matter what medical service you received, they still had the opportunity to have an evangelism moment. So we had an entire evangelism team that would meet you at the end of your visit and say, do you have a moment, can we talk? And they'd usher them to a space, or you'll see here, they're in the middle of the building, and they'll just talk to them and pray with them. But I'll tell you one thing. We served over 300 on that first one, only because we ran out of stuff. But our success was due only to our local volunteers. Because you imagine that first picture, we only had, 12, 15 of us? No way it would have happened. But God saw fit to give us the wisdom and understanding to know that we needed to be sure that we mobilized with the communities in which we were going to assist. So I want to take a moment to say we need to beware and prepare for the unintended consequences of medical missions. Okay? So a lot of times people rush out and say, let's go do medical missions, let's go help people, let's go. But the reality of it is what happens if? What happens if you take the blood pressure of someone and they're at near stroke level? What happens if you take their glucose levels and they have uncontrolled diabetes? Do you just say to them, you know what, Anna? You have uncontrolled diabetes, but I can't help you. Is that what God would do? No. God would see fit to always find ways to provide what you need. And as a result, that is what we had to do. We recognized that in some of our visits, we were finding people with this uncontrolled diabetes, uncontrolled hypertension. So what did we do? A colleague and I came back the next year. We came back to the U.S. We both were at UNC. And UNC had a lot of little grants that faculty could write for. So we found a grant that allowed us to do chronic kidney disease screenings. Well, what's good about chronic kidney disease screenings is that we know that hypertension and diabetes run in line with chronic kidney disease, right? So there's this cardiorenal thing that we're not sure if it's hypertension and diabetes that causes chronic kidney disease or chronic kidney disease that causes hypertension diabetes. Either way, we were able to write a grant that allowed us to do screenings. Well, with that grant, we were able to buy resources that we would not have normally been able to buy for this very purpose. But in addition to that, we still struggled with, well, what happens? What happens if we screen someone for chronic kidney disease and they have an issue? It's unethical as a scientist, as a biostatistician and epidemiologist, to recognize a harm and not do anything about it. So what do? We mobilized again, and we began to research and identify facilities in Ghana, in the areas that we were going to do our screenings, that could provide the necessary care. Now, at the time, there was only 2, but lucky for us, they were in the general areas in which we were screening. So we made sure that we connected with the physicians that were there and said, hey guys, we're coming in June and July. We're doing a screening. We're not sure what we're going to find, but we want you to know that we want you to be ready for any referrals that we have to make. Now, I will say I praise God that we didn't have to enable that. I mean, there were 2 people who had numbers out the wazoo, so we did refer them for clinical care later, but for the most part, we didn't. However, you have to be able to plan for those kind of things, because what would have happened if? So I want us to recognize that we need to be able to establish lasting relationships with community organizations churches, and healthcare providers in communities you're going to serve through medical missions. Now, in addition to thinking about the unintended consequences of medical missions, with global missions, it's important that you understand and respect the culture in which you're going to work in. You know, the last thing you want to do is go into a community in which, you know, you completely do what you think is helping, but is actually insulting. I'll give you an example. When we go to visit the chief in Winneba, you know, we're used to being, you know, just walking on in and, well, no. You know, the men go in first, then the women, and that's how it has to be. But if you didn't know that, you would have insulted the head of the village before you even said hello, and this is why I'm here. How do you think the care that you wanted to be able to give or the message of God that you wanted to give to them would be received? Because you didn't care enough to ask them what's their culture, what's their belief. So I say that to say, every time we go to Winneba, we meet with the chief, Chief Garte, and say, you know, Chief Garte, we're here again. We're so glad to be here, and these are our intentions for our visit. Now, because we've been going back and forth to Winneba for so many years, probably at least 10, 12 years, you know, we speak to Chief Garte regularly, you know, once a week over the phone, over email, just engaged to sort of keep the relationships going. But more than making sure you meet the leaders of the community, we also pay our respects to the elders of the community. And this is actually, this woman here, it was actually the oldest living woman in the community. And she's also there, she was also their church mother. So we go and we visit her and say, we're here again. I'm so glad to see you. It's part of being sensitive to the cultures in which you are being engaged in through global missions. We also found it important to partner with a local church in that area. So at the time, the church was called World Miracle Church. They've now changed their name. But we partnered with them in such a way that we have conducted family summits. We've conducted fun days with the orphanage in Winneba. We've done cultural exchanges and educational exchanges with the high school students there. We've done, of course, medical missions and a library. So here are some pictures of us worshiping together. So every trip we go in, we worship alongside with them. Winneba is a general area where there are some dialects that are not English. So there are interpreters throughout the whole service. Here is an example. It's sort of hard to see. This is Pastor Chris Hamlin. He is the pastor at Tabernacle Baptist Church here in Birmingham. And so when he traveled with us, he actually offers the word of the scripture and the sermon for that particular time. Now, during our visits there, we had, as I said, family summits. And during our family summits, we break the children up. We break the children into a group, the men into a group, and the women into a group. And we do that so that we can have engaged conversations at the level in which each group is. And so I love children, so I always got to have the kids group. And so you'll see that's me here cheesing in the front because they forgot to save me a spot. But we have a great time. This is my aunt as well. But we have times where we engage with Bible stories. We do arts and crafts. We play games. We teach songs. And so are you. So let us praise the Lord. Right hand, left hand, right foot, left foot. Father Abraham, and when he sang. Actually, this particular year, they thought they were teaching us this song. So we went along with it. But either way, it is an opportunity for us to engage in a very meaningful way. In addition to that, I said we break up the women from the men. This particular year, the women were learning about hearing God's voice. We've talked about sexual health. We've talked about mental health. Whatever topics the community says is we feel like are important that year is what we focus on. And so the missionaries that go with us are the ones who are responsible for the teaching for that piece, and we just engage with the community in that way. You also see on the next one the men, and this is the men gather. So the women are on the inside, the men are on the outside on one side, and the kids on the outside on the other. But here, this particular year, the men were talking about HIV and AIDS. Because, when you talk about sexual health, it's usually something women talk about. You don't usually hear men talking about it, but we needed men to understand just as important for them to understand. Okay. In addition to that, one of the things the leaders said that they wanted was a library. So we set up an opportunity to actually partner with them to help them develop a community library. And so this is the billboard that sort of says, this land has been earmarked for the community library. Here are our partners. And this right here is just the day that we did what we call cutting the soil. And that's sort of where you dig up some of the soil, you take it away, and then you plant a tree there to sort of symbolize the intentions of the place. In addition to that, of course, we did the medical missions in Winneba just like we did in NEMA. And so, it's amazing how no matter what city or what committee or community you're in, the resources may be different, but the needs are still the same, right? So, and this is one of my other favorite parts of our missions trip, and that's when we go to Rafiki Village. And Rafiki Village is the orphanage that's there in Winneba. And the first time we went, we looked around and we realized the girls were playing with dolls that didn't look like them. So for a lot of people, that may not mean a lot. But for women of color, it means a lot to be able to look at a doll or a toy or an image on TV and it represents who you are. More than that, can you imagine being in Africa and not seeing a doll of color? Surprising, right? So as a result, we initiated what we call the Brown Baby Project and the Match Car Box Project. We didn't want to leave the boys out. So each year, we collect brown baby dolls and match and cars, and we pile them up. So that ends up being half of some of the mission boxes as well. And then we get to go to the orphanage, and we pass them out to the kids. We have a great time. We do Bible stories. We do arts and crafts, and we just really spend time there. The thing that makes it so special is that over the years, you see the kids as they grow. So that it's not just a one and done, let me go and let me drop this off. But you actually get to see the growth and see God's revel and how he's watching over these children. Another thing that we do uniquely is that we have what we call the Birmingham Global Youth Leadership Group. It is a group of high school students from the greater Birmingham area that we train in leadership. And we take them along with us on our missions trip. And their main part of their missions trip is that they have a cultural and educational exchange with the secondary students in Winneba. So they go there, they engage with them, they have classes with them. They are also responsible for doing a presentation to them. And the topics of the presentation becomes the responsibility of the students. They choose what they think is most important. So some years we had the importance of recycling. And partly the recycling was because the previous year, students had gone and seen plastic everywhere. And they wanted to help them understand why it would be important to care about the environment. Okay. So what are some of our missions lessons from Winneba? Well, the first thing is you need to really begin to learn the importance of respecting the community's culture. Okay? And making sure that you establish these lasting relationships. These relationships with the community leaders, the church leaders, before the mission work begins. If you do that, then your relationships last, the missions work is more profound and lasting. And it helps make sure your missions work is more meaningful. Because the last thing you want to do is spend all your money and time planning a mission to get there, and it didn't help. so we want you not to be a savior. Let me come in and save you. Let me come in and help you. But we want you to have a more of a mentality of, let me be a vessel that can be used by God to provide whatever you need. So the last one I want to talk about is when missions becomes an outreach. And I'll talk a little bit about the Apostle Project. To me, this particular project really speaks to like how amazing God is. I mean, we already know he's amazing, but when I tell you this story, you're going to be like, wow. So the history of the project. So just to give you a little background, Apostle is a really small village. It was originally in a different area, and the government of Ghana decided to build a dam. And that dam was going to be used to provide electricity, and as a result, it flooded out this particular community. And so they transplanted that community, moved into another space, named it renamed it, and then here we are. And so as a result, the Queen Mother, so I mentioned the chief in Winneba. There's either a chief or a Queen Mother. So in this instance, in this area, they have a Queen Mother. And this is her, Queen Mother Nana. And so she invited us. So, she had been engaged with us before in Accra, and so had met us there and met our work there. And so she invited our groups to come and visit her area. So while we were there, we were welcomed in a way that I just have never been welcomed before. I've been to Ghana many times, but I'd never had this experience before. So they welcomed us in a very traditional way.
Our friend.
Thank you. So after such a warm welcome, you don't ever go anywhere empty-handed, right? You always make sure you present something. That's a Southern thing. So while we were there, we presented them with school books and basketballs and other sports equipment. And, we really just wanted to say, thank you for inviting us. Thank you for having us in your space. And so while we were there, we had a very unique opportunity to visit the classrooms, to visit with the students there in their primary school, and just had a great time. But while we were there touring, something happened. So you know how you're walking around and you go somewhere and you just sort of lean your arm on something? What do you think happened? The desk fell. So the one desk that was the teacher's desk that was in the room collapsed under our hand. So of course we're mortified, right? Or the gentleman that did it was mortified. But what we later found out is that the teachers really didn't have a space to grade their papers. That they congregated under the tree to do their work. Now the way that we felt and how we were in our hearts and how God led us is we couldn't leave like that, right? So we mobilized and collected money and gave them money and said, here, you go out, you get supplies, you build some tables for your teachers. And they did just that. The next year when we went back to visit, because you can't ever go once, right, and not visit. So we went back the next year, and the thing that was so amazing about it is we went back the next year, remember we told you we left them with books? Just like the kids welcomed us that day, the very first time, they had a few kids come and read from the books that we had given them. It was their show of how grateful they were for what we had been able to leave for their community. So that left us realizing that God was calling us to do something here. So what did we do? We had discussions with the community leaders and said, what is it that you need? We want to have a lasting impression here. We want to let God's presence be seen and felt in this community. And so we met with the chiefs and the community leaders and the teachers, and we decided to build a library. And so here you see the plans for a 2-story library. The first floor is just the library. The second floor was the community room, so that they would have a place to be able to have community events. So, in summer of 2014, we broke ground here for it. So you'll see again the Queen Mother. That's my mom and that's my dad. These are good friends and family and then community members. And so we began the process. And if you're not aware, in Ghana, everything is prepaid. They don't have mortgages. So you pay for what you can get. So you send money for the cement, you send money for the bricks. Once you have it, you make what you can make and you keep moving. So the good thing about that is once you're done building, it's paid for, right? So we began with sending money for bricks and cement. We began with the structure. By 2019, we had the whole first floor done. Look at God. So in 2019, we had a delegation go last year, and they welcomed us. The students, again, were there to welcome us and invite us in. You'll see, again, they're presenting us with flowers, as you would in the traditional way. And we are at our place. But let me show you what's even more amazing. This is what the inside of the library looked at. Now, not only were we able to assist with providing a space for them to now have a library, right? It also provided economic opportunities. Why? Because you now were able to send money to an area and you were able to hire local masonry, local carpenters. Everything that was done within this were done by local representatives. So this is the view from the inside. These are all handmade from the wood there. And so we were able to have our first community meeting as of last year, 5 years after the groundbreaking. Pretty awesome, right? So we had a training of the community leaders and teachers to sort of train them on library sciences, because the last thing you want to do is bring a library in and, we say, okay, here, we're going to do the Dewey Decimal System, and they're looking at you like, okay. So, we've met with them. We also had opportunities to do a health care screening with them. So this particular year, we talked about breast cancer. But look where we are now. This is the second floor. We are well on our way. This July, we were hoping to do a major grand opening of the first floor, but because of COVID, we weren't able to go. So we didn't allow that to stop us. We just said, well, we'll just keep pressing. So our hope and our prayer is that maybe by the time we go next year, this will be done, and we can do a grand opening of the whole space. But I will say that we've already shipped over maybe 3 shipments worth of books that are there waiting to be placed on the shelves. We've had community organizations here, like the Links of Birmingham, who have given us grant money to buy laptops and whiteboards and all of those things to help deck out this library. But we also recognize that it's not just enough to give us the equipment, right? We need to also provide the service. So we also have the money now to be able to provide internet for several years to come. So I always like to say thank you to our partners here in Birmingham, who've allowed us the opportunity to see the vision of the Apostle Library come into play. But I'm never remiss to say thank you to God, because if it wasn't for Him imparting the vision upon us, we wouldn't be in the space that we're in now. But more than that, we wouldn't have the sign of His blessings that we're able to see in that library each day. So what are some of our lessons from our missions? Be sure that you always involve the community. I've said that 1,000,000 times over, right? But you're going to always want to involve your community leaders, your religious leaders, your political leaders, You want to make sure that the true needs of the communities are met through missions. You want to be sure you seek God's direction and what needs to be done in those communities. You want to make sure you're establishing partnerships with area resources, like we did with the healthcare clinics, right? Because you want to ensure the continuity of care when you're not there. And lastly, you want to make sure you're making sustainable changes in these communities.
We do have some questions. First of all, if you are an undergrad student, you need to get out for class. This is a good time to exit. But if you do have a question, what we'll do is you will ask me, and then I will relay it so that those in overflow and in the recording can hear the question. So you would need to make it succinct. If your question is not succinct, you might not want to ask that. So anybody, would you like to ask Dr. Amamoo a question? I can't read your faces anymore. This is so...
Don't worry, if there are no questions, I got more pictures.
I was wondering, do you have to get government permission for some of the medical clinics?
Very good question.
Okay, so Dr. Hayes asked, does she need to get medical permission to do some of the work in clinic? Oh, I'm sorry, government permission for these medical clinics.
So in the earlier days, no. In the earlier days, you did not need to have medical, you didn't have to have governmental or healthcare, what is it called? The Ministry of Health permission. They have since then changed those rules. So now what you have to do is you have to go and present your credentials there and say, this is who we are, and get what they call a license to do, a provisional license to do things here. Now, of course, that comes with a fee, right? And so as a result, in some instances, we're not able to do as many of the medical missions as we could, and not able to bring as many of the physician types as we could in the past, because the fee prohibits us from able to do that. So, there is one to answer your question now. And so, we're still working with them to hope that we can establish this ongoing relationship, because we've been doing it for so long. Thank you.
Any other question? Were you planning on sharing the pictures?
I have no pictures.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I
No,
apparently interrupted.
No, you didn't interrupt. I was
Okay, good.
So that was the end of the missions talk.
Okay, good.
These are just
All right.
pictures of Ghana, because I figured some people have never seen Ghana, right?
Right.
So you'd like to see pictures, but we were only going to get to it.
We have some time.
Yeah. So there's so much to see in Ghana, right? So this is just a funny picture. We always do. But it's funny to us because it always talks about give way, and then you see the people pushing the bus. But whatever. Sorry, wrong direction. But there's carvers' villages throughout where people are doing handcrafted artifacts and things of that nature. One of my favorite places to go to is Aubrey Gardens. It's their botanical gardens there. If you see here, you see these tall trees. If you can imagine, it's almost like a half a mile worth of trees just like that. It's absolutely breathtaking. Black Star Square is the Independence Square, and so that's where they have a lot of their independence rallies. This is an example, and it's really not that great showing up here, but this is the Cape Coast area. Ghana, of course, is along the coastline, and so there's a lot of wonderful, beautiful blue beaches there. So it's one of my favorite places to go. Something that's really unique about Ghana is that they also were a big slave trade environment. So there are two slave trade castles there. Elmina is the largest of the two. If you remember, President Obama and other people have gone there before. And so every year we take our missionaries to see, not only experience the missions trip, but they also experience the beauty of Ghana. So here is Elmina Castle. This is also the coastline right around Elmina. This is what all the boats look like. So depending on the time of day you get there, all the boats and fishermen will be along the shore, and then you'll see them flow all out to go fishing. So if you can imagine, it's like a beautiful parade of like colorfulness. This is one of our favorite restaurants to eat at in Accra. It sits literally off the edge of the ocean. They have the best seafood ever, and it's like in the middle of the city. So we always take our missionaries there to eat. Ghana has so many people to minister to, right? And so there's so many opportunities, and so we welcome you to consider, joining us. My husband and I have most recently began doing work in Hohoi, which is his area. It's about 4 hours north of Accra. We've established a scholarship there called the Grace Fellows, so that we provide funds for a student to go through school each year. And so we also have done school supply drives and school book drives and things of that nature. But this is just some pictures of what Marketplace would look like in Ghana. And then these are just some of the beautiful women that are there. So thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I pray God's blessing on you all.